everyone, and thank you for joining us today. You are clearly thinking of buying, investing, or relocating to the Algarve. I don't blame you, having been there myself every year for the last 3 years. I totally get the attraction. It's the equivalent of heaven on earth. I'm sad to say that I've butchered some of the most beautiful golf courses across the Algarve whenever I've visited. But yeah, it's got a special place in my heart, so I could understand the interest. We're definitely oversubscribed today. We've been inundated with questions, and we've got lots of people that are going to be watching live. We're going to try as much as possible to cover all of the questions that you've raised, but we're not going to delve in too much detail to keep it relevant for everybody that's dialed in. We will distribute a recording, so it is going to be recorded, so you will get the opportunity to watch it back if necessary, or possibly forward it on to your partner or another family member. We'd obviously encourage you to seek and get your own advice as well as what we're going to give you today. If you want an individual session with any of the panelists, that's something that quite often happens with these webinars, and then we can specifically drill down and look at your individual circumstances, make sure that the advice is relevant. We've got some brilliant questions to go through, and we've got a fantastic panel of experts here with us today. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to each of them, and then I'll get them to expand upon their experience in a little bit more detail. So first of all, we've got Bruce Hawker, who's a founder and director of not only Fine & Country Algarve, but also the founder and CEO of Open Media. Lots of experience within the Algarve housing market. We also have with us Mark Quinn from Spectrum. He's a cross-border tax advisor and chartered financial planner, and again a stalwart of the local areas who knows the topography of the place of Algarve very well. We also have Vicky. Vicky is our legal representative today. She's a partner in the business that she represents. So we're going to give you the insights into the nuances of the conveyancing system within the local area and how it differs from where you are in the world. And then finally, we have with us Steve, the currency expert, the king of international money transfers, and he's the person that's going to give you the explanation as to the best timing in order to be able to port your money to get the best return on your investment. But we'll expand upon everybody in a little bit more detail, but I'll do it person by person, and I'll also ask some questions of the individual. So Bruce, give us a little bit more about your background, and I've got some specific questions for you, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, first of all, John and Steve, thank you very much for the invitation. And great as always to be doing anything with you guys with over there in the UK. So yeah, my name is Bruce Hawker. My wife and I founded Fine & Country with a business partner here in the Algarve 14 years ago now. 13 years ago, sorry, 2013. We opened the office, but my wife had been an estate agent here for many years before that. I also founded a publishing business in the Algarve, and that's called Open Media. Also operates elsewhere in Portugal as well. And we also organise events. So I'm heavily involved in organising events both here in Portugal. They're called the Living in the Algarve events, and in the USA, called the Living in Portugal events, which are held all around the US. In fact, I'm off next week to Denver, Philadelphia, and Boston. Then we're also involved in the events in the UK, normally with the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in the UK, where we are media partners, and Fine & Country are partners actively in these events as well. They're called the Moving to Portugal events. So when I'm not on the road, I'm here in the Algarve. That's me.
And you're off to Philadelphia as well in the not too distant future, as well as those other locations. Is that right?
So, I think I said it, Denver, Philadelphia, and Boston next week. Yeah. So I say Denver on the 7th, Philadelphia on the 11th, and Boston on the 14th.
And then also the end of the month, we're in the UK.
26th, we've got the Moving to Portugal event in London. And then we've got what I'm really looking forward to is this fabulous event that you've put together in the UK, John, the the International Luxury Property Exhibition, which is bringing together fine and country agents for all around the world.
Yeah, very exciting. So it's good to know that you're out there on the road promoting Algarve as a destination and a location. It doesn't just do it itself, you need to put it in front of people. But talk to me now about the property market in Portugal and in the Algarve. What trends are you seeing at the minute?
We've seen, okay, I suppose if we turn the clock back to COVID, it seems another age now, but there was obviously the big post-COVID boom where we saw prices really skyrocket in 2022. What we're seeing now is I wouldn't say a cooling of the market. I think the market has really matured. The prices certainly aren't going down at the moment, but the increases in prices that we've seen over recent years, we don't feel they're going to be as we feel we're going to be the same levels of annual increase over the next couple of years that we've seen, certainly leading up to this year. Probably similar to last year, we saw about realistically in our market 6 to 7% growth last year, and we would see sensible growth like that on the horizon for this year as well. The demand is still there. The number of inquiries that we are getting from people from all around the world are very, very similar year on year. So certainly there's no cooling in the market, which is what a lot of people are hoping for. But it's not happened yet, and we don't see it happening really.
So in my role with Fine and Country, I deal with the internationals all across the business. We're in 300 locations worldwide in 6 continents, and you used COVID as a marker there, and there has been a seismic shift in buying appetite from people. And post-COVID, one of the things that we've seen is this surge in digital nomads, people that have got the ability to work remotely. Therefore, if you can work remotely, why wouldn't you choose to be somewhere that's beautiful, has got better weather, has got a better lifestyle, and then you still maybe have the capacity to less frequently travel to your head office or to other locations? Would you say that that's been one of the catalysts behind those trends and the surge in appetite?
To some extent, definitely. I mean, the appeal of the lower cost of living, the great weather, the outdoor lifestyle to remote workers is very strong. And it certainly is a market. Portugal also has a tax incentive for digital nomads, which I'm sure Mark can fill us in a bit on later. Which is, certainly we do get people buying with us coming from the UK, from the US. We often get a lot of expats returning from around the world. So expats coming in, say, from the Middle East or from Singapore, for example, people who have lived abroad and they want to come back to Europe. They don't want to necessarily return to the UK in the case of Brits. They could be French. Our market is here in the Algarve is incredibly diverse now. We've so far in the last 2 years, we're at 32 countries, so the different nationalities that we've sold to over the last 2 years. And we're just about, hopefully, to close the deal with the Romanian, so that will take it up to 33.
How many of those languages do you speak, Bruce?
Only English and Portuguese fluently, but I can just about get by in Spanish.
32 is incredible. I mean, that is really diverse. So you're seeing buyers come from literally the 4 corners of the world.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. But the UK is still our strongest market. The UK, our biggest market is the UK, followed by Germany. Then the US is sitting in 3rd place at the moment, followed by France. So they're really the big 4. But the UK makes up 33% of our market. So that's based on last year's figures. And no other market makes up more than 7 or 8%. So that really puts it into perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting. That sentiment is echoed across lots of our international partners around Portugal, Spain. It's a similar traction. Would you say one of the growing parts is the influx of Americans? Would you say that there's more and more
Yes.
Americans buying?
3 years ago, the Americans weren't even in our top 10 buyers. And they're now the third largest market, but really sitting only just marginally behind Germany. So it's almost joint second place with Germany. The US market is very, very important to the real estate markets all over Portugal, to developers, to estate agents. The US market is definitely the fastest growing market, without a shade of doubt.
Okay, fair enough. And in terms of if you were buying, one of the questions is getting the best price for a property, and what are the best actions to achieve this? I guess from a buyer's perspective, what's the how and where can you go for the best value for money
Within the Algarve?
Yeah.
So basically, the further you go away from the coast, wherever you are in the Algarve, the more you will get for your buck. So, but this needn't necessarily mean being a long way from the coast. For example, I live in Praia de Carvoeiro, which is roughly halfway along the Algarve coast. It's not one of the most expensive areas of the Algarve, but it's certainly not one of the cheapest. But if we were to drive half an hour inland only, so sort of just behind Silves out to the Messinge area, the same villa that you could, for example, buy for 1.5 million maybe here in Carvoeiro, if you were to move half an hour inland, it would be around $1 million. So I think that kind of, and then obviously if you move further west, west of Lagos and up to the west coast, prices again are lower. And if you go further east towards the Spanish border, prices seem to be lower. One thing that I would say in terms of value for money at the moment, the east is definitely a growth area. Really, I think the only reason that it is that the prices are a bit lower than, say, where we are now in Carvoeiro would be that there's been less development there over the years in terms of self-catering accommodation. It was always more of a hotel destination back in the 90s, early 2000s. Really, villa developments, golf resorts, golf courses, all this is quite a new phenomenon in the east. So we're seeing a lot of really high quality new product coming online in the east. That's starting to bring prices up, similar to the rest of the Algarve.
And it's interesting, each of the different locations dotted along the coastline of the Algarve, they've all got their own identity. I was in Lagos last year, and it feels very much old Portugal rather than it's got its own identity. So it isn't always about value for money. It's also about the lifestyle that you look in the architecture that you want to try and experience and enjoy in terms of the outlook. Okay, that's interesting. And in terms of the buying process, obviously it's very different subject to where you are in the world. In the UK, we've got an incredibly problematic conveyancing process. Obviously, Vicky's going to talk about that a little bit later on. But how does it differ in Portugal versus other parts of the world?
A question for me or for Vicky?
Yeah, no, for you. This is for you still.
Okay. So I think the main difference is, say, compared to the UK, is that we have the promissory contracts, which obviously Vicky can talk about in more detail as the lawyer. But the promissory contracts, typically somebody puts down a 10% deposit, and once the promissory contract is paid, then basically if the vendor backs out, they would have to give the buyer back double the money, and if the buyer backs out, they would lose their deposit. And this hardly ever happens, so it really is a great safeguard. It's not like in the UK. I know my sons, they were born here, but they live in the UK, and they've both had nightmares buying their houses because basically that whole time from waiting to go to contract, which can take 6 months, it can take 7 months, it can take eight months. And there is obviously every chance it's going to fall through, and then everybody loses out. So here we have the promissory contract, which is good. I think it's something that would make sense to be introduced everywhere. Getting to promissory contracts is the struggle, because obviously people don't want to lose their deposit or give back double their deposit. So it's always a struggle for us to get the deal. Once the deal is at the promissory contract, basically it's over the line. I think in 13 years and many hundreds of deals that we've done, I can only think of one deal that's actually fallen through after the promissory contract, where someone has lost their deposit.
Wow, so it's a much more efficient system.
Yeah.
So I've been inundated with questions around price and what you can get for your money, and different price points and bands in terms of types and style. We can't answer them all, but you'll probably have to answer this with a range. How much would you expect to pay for an average 3-bedroom property, 4-bedroom or 5-bedroom property across the Algarve? And I appreciate you're going to have super prime areas versus the general market, but just give us some indicative figures around what you would get for your money.
I think to put things into perspective, we should start at the top of the market, at the top really. So say Quinta del Lago, the best plots in Val de Lobo as well. Obviously, prices there would be more than double, if not triple, what they are where I'm here in Carvuero. So a nice 4-bedroom villa, modern 4-bedroom villa in Quinta del Lago with a pool. Going to be talking really, depending on the age and condition of the property, anywhere from, I would say, 5 to 6 million up to 10 or 15 million, without getting into something really, really special where prices can go as high as 20, 30 million or more. And you don't see that really in the Algarve outside of that Quinta del Lago, Val de Lobo area. Although on the cliff tops, around Carvuero, if you have a modern, not necessarily modern architecture, but a newly built luxury property on the cliff tops with uninterrupted ocean views, that can command, I would say, close to half the prices that you would get in a prime location in Quinta del Lago. But you've only got to move back to second or third line, and then the prices will drop by a great deal. I mean, really, I suppose, let's look at that figure I gave there, sort of starting sort of 6, 7 million for a nice villa in Quinta del Lago or Val de Lobo. If you were to take a similar size villa and put it in the hills around Lulay, for example, say Santa Barbara, Bullichem, somewhere around there, it could go for anywhere between 1 to 2 million for a similar property, maybe a bit more for something special, again, depending on the views. Prices would be very similar to that, say, here in Carvuero. For example, we've just agreed a sale today, actually, on a very nice 4-bedroom villa. It's actually a 30-year-old property, but it's immaculate, absolutely beautiful property. 4 bedrooms, 7,000 square meter plot, large swimming pool, tennis court, and that's just sold for 1.5 million euros. And certainly you would struggle to get that, anything similar to that in the so-called Golden Triangle. So that's good value for money, and that still does exist, and they still can be found. It's difficult to find a substantial 4-bedroom villa on its own plot for under 1.5 million, really, in most parts of the Algarve now. Bring it down to a 3-bedroom villa on a smaller plot. In most areas, say here in Carvuero, the hills around Lulay, the West Algarve around Lagos, You can find a nice 3-bedroom villa for around £1 million still. That's still possible.
And when you spoke earlier, you said that you prices within the last 12 months have probably grown 6 to 7%, and you're not anticipating that they will go down, but you're not anticipating that they'll shoot up. So your predictions are a stable market for the 12 months moving forward. Is that fair to say?
Definitely, yeah. There's no reason for us not to think it's going to be stable, or to really expect a kind of post-COVID boom again. It's yeah, people. There's a lot of people, for example, in the US who are keen, who are looking for a plan B, who are keen to look at a new way of life. There's people in the UK and elsewhere. A lot of people not happy with certain situations in the UK or in France. And as long as that situation remains unchanged, and Portugal is viewed as being extremely safe. I think that's really important. We are officially the 7th safest country in the world, behind the likes of Singapore and Iceland and a couple of others. And that's a big draw. It's not just about the weather. And our cost of living as well. I think only Greece in Europe has a lower cost of living.
We're running out of boxes to tick here, Bruce. It's the cost of living, it's the weather, it's safe. You've got beautiful coastlines. Yeah, it's a pretty compelling pitch for anybody thinking of buying that. Look, yeah. we've got to move on to some of the money-related questions, but there's some incredible answers there, Bruce. So very much appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll have time to loop back round and ask some more. But Mark, with your blessing, I'm going to jump across to yourself. What are the considerations? Well, first of all, do a bigger and a better introduction to yourself and your experience and your time in Portugal. I appreciate it. And then I'd like you to answer the question, what are the considerations when planning a move to Portugal regarding estate planning?
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Jonathan. And yeah, thank you, as Bruce said, for the invite as well. It's a pleasure to be here today. And good afternoon, everybody. And also apologise for the strange lady that's peeping over my shoulder. I'm a bit self-conscious because all my co-presenters look very smart. Their offices look very formal and official, and I'm sat here in a hotel meeting room as I couldn't get back to the office. Hence the weird drawing behind me. But yes, as Jonathan said at the start, I'm a chartered financial planner and UK tax advisor. So I started my career in the UK. I moved overseas in 2014, so I joined a European advisory practice who sent me to Portugal. It wasn't necessarily my choice, but I'm glad they did. I'm a great believer in fate, and it was fate that brought me here, and I've loved every minute of it. I've been here 12 years now. 5 years ago, I was given the opportunity to launch the Portugal branch of Spectrum IFA, which is another European advisory firm. So we focus on generally British nationals moving to sunny places in the EU, Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Malta, etc. And my focus is on helping clients relocate from where they are in the world to live in Portugal. So that's a quick summary of what I do. To answer your question, Jonathan, key considerations. I mean, one of the big changes that's occurred recently to inheritance tax and succession planning in particular is the change to what's called domicile. So historically, if you're a British national or if you spent a substantial time in the UK and you have what's called a UK domicile, it's in crude terms, it just means you originate from the UK, and as a general rule, you inherit that from your father. So most UK nationals have what's called a UK domicile of origin, and that was used to determine the basis of inheritance tax. So even if you left the UK and never went back to the UK, you always had a UK IHT obligation on your worldwide estate, and that meant 40% tax. So it was quite a painful tax for a lot of people. And it was very difficult to shape that domicile of origin. It wasn't simply a case of moving to Portugal and saying goodbye to the UK taxman. But what happened with effect from April 2025 is they've replaced the concept of domicile for assessing inheritance tax. And now it's based on what's called long-term residency. So if you've been in the UK the last 10 years, you're what's regarded as a UK long-term resident, and your worldwide estate is still subject to inheritance tax. But after 10 years of leaving the UK, you're regarded as a non-long-term resident, and therefore you have no liabilities to inheritance tax in the UK, with the exception of any UK-based assets. So as a general rule now, people are looking to extract assets from the UK where possible, you know, if their plan is ultimately to leave the UK and retire or live in somewhere like Portugal or any non-UK jurisdiction. So that's a big issue at the moment. Other key considerations: planning early. I know it's a theme that the rest of the panel will probably talk about today, but we say it time and time again because we see the same mistakes being made. Don't move to Portugal and then start trying to get your affairs in order. Try and get, you know, speak to people like to Vicky, Bruce, Steve, myself early on in the process, even if it's years ahead. It's always worth being aware of the issues that are sort of that are going to affect your plan to relocate to Portugal.
Okay, that's fascinating. So yeah, if you've got that 10-year window, the earlier you start it, the better. So you specifically encourage people to get in contact prior to making the move. Why? What are the ramifications there? If why can't you just go and move and sort those things out retrospectively, especially if you want to try and count down that 10 years as soon as possible?
Yeah, it's a good question, and you can. I mean, you can just get up and go in some situations, but I'll give you a couple of examples that I see commonly. A lot of our clients or prospective clients have pension schemes. Now, in the UK, you can take 25% of your pension pot out tax-free when you're eligible to access your pension. But if you delay that and take it out when you're in Portugal, or rather more specifically, when you've left the UK, irrespective of where you are, you're going to be taxed on that 25%. So, you've got to do things in the right order. Another example is ISAs, individual savings accounts, very tax effective from a UK point of view. Once you've left the UK, they no longer offer that tax protection, so they're fully taxed. So again, a general planning point is to surrender ISAs before you leave, because you can do so tax-free. If you delay it till you come to Portugal, you're going to be taxed. So it's unnecessary tax payments you'll face when a bit of forward planning could have solved it.
So here's one. Is there any mileage in purchasing property through a company vehicle rather than as an individual? Is that anything that people do? Is that something that people do?
It is, and maybe we get Bruce's view on this as well later. But my thinking is it's becoming less and less attractive. Historically, it offered tax benefits to hold properties through company structures. Now the tax position is a lot worse, and there's also a perception sometimes now with buyers that if it's held within a company structure, it's going to involve more complexity and possible tax issues inherent in the company, so they don't know quite what they're getting into. And so for that reason, I think keep it simple. If possible, try and buy it in your own name. Also for future proofing, having a property in your own name works, because unlike the UK where we can sell our main home tax-free, in Portugal the default position is it's taxable. However, there are two main ways of avoiding that tax. The first one is after you sell your main home here, you reinvest in another home, either in Portugal or the EU, or that you can use an approved investment or pension structure. Now, both of those options are only available if you're selling a main home that's in your own name. If you're selling it and it's held within a company structure, there's no way of deferring the tax. So to answer your question in short, I think if possible, keep it simple and purchase in your own name rather than through corporates.
So the example that you've just given there is specifically relating to somebody purchasing their main residential property. What if it's a holiday home? Are there any tax implications on exit or anything like that? Is there capital gains tax if you rent the property? How does that work?
Yeah, so if it's just going to be, there's two considerations here. If it's going to be a holiday home and somebody's remaining a UK tax resident, if they subsequently sell the Portuguese property, then Portugal, because it's a physical bricks and mortar asset in Portugal would have the first taxing right. but also because the person selling the property is a UK tax resident, then they would also have capital gains tax in the UK. Now, there is a treaty, so they wouldn't pay tax twice. You'd get a credit for tax paid in Portugal. And the way that Portugal works is you pay tax on 50% of the gain. So 50% of the gain on the Portuguese property is added to your income for the year.
But is that only if you've rented the property out? What about if you've just bought it as a holiday home? You've not rented it out, but it's appreciated in value 100,000 euros over a 2-year period.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, capital gains is taxed on the appreciation. Capital gains tax is due on the appreciation in the value of an asset. So yes, even if you've not rented it out, you still have the capital gains tax issue.
Okay, interesting. Okay. And is there any other considerations around taxation that people need to think about other than getting in and speaking to a specialist like yourself early as possible in the process?
Yeah, I mean, just doing that initial assessment to see where you stand in the sense of what does Portugal look like compared to a UK tax issue and financial position, because it could be a lot better, it could be worse, or it could be neutral. I think having that clear understanding is key. But also the timing of the exit from the UK tax net is something to consider, because we're operating on different tax years. The UK runs April to April, Portugal and the rest of the world pretty much run on a calendar year basis. Again, that can provide some opportunities for planning, but it can also provide some, pitfalls that you could fall into. So just take advice early.
Okay, fabulous. Some great insight there, Mark. I really appreciate that. With your blessing now, I'm going to jump across to Vicky. Vicky, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself in a little bit more detail, if that's possible. And then I'm keen to understand a little bit more about the conveyancing process. I know Bruce touched upon promissory contracts. A lot of people won't be familiar with that, so if we could expand upon it, that would be great.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you very much for this invitation to be at this webinar. Hello, everyone who's attending. My name is Vicky Rodrigues, and I'm a partner at the law firm TPA. We've been around for over 20 years, and we have offices in Lisbon and in the Algarve. I head up our firm's private client department. And what we do is we handhold the clients who are looking to come and invest in Portugal. So we assist with the property side, we assist with the immigration side, and also Mark touched upon, we also assist with the estate planning side, so having a will and considering what happens to your assets when you die. So it's a pleasure to be a part of this panel, and I hope that this does spark some interest in terms of buying in Portugal. And as Bruce said, our conveyancing process is particular. We have the concept of the promissory contract, which is a document where all the terms and conditions of the deal are set in writing. So the buyer and the seller agree on the price, timing, whether or not there'll be financing or not, if there'll be content, that will then be put into the contract. The deposit is also something unique to the Portuguese conveyancing process. So we have normally a 10 to 20% deposit that's paid by the buyer to the seller. It's not held on escrow, and that frightens a lot of buyers, understandably so. But that's the normal practice in Portugal. So you pay it directly to the seller, and then if there's any default, then the buyer will lose the deposit if they default, and then on the part of the seller, they have to pay the deposit back in double. And then you set a date for completion, and completion is a formal occurrence. It's signed at a notary, and that's when you effectively take over ownership.
Okay, wow. So the deposit gets paid straight to the vendor?
Correct. It's not held on escrow, and that does frighten a lot of buyers.
Okay, so look, I've got to ask the question because there'll be people that will be dialing in watching. What happens if the seller spends the money and then defaults on the completion?
Well, thankfully, as Bruce said, that's not at all very common in Portugal. But if it does, then it goes to our litigation department to resolve it through the courts.
Okay, understood. And one of the questions that I've been passed is, what is the NIF number?
Okay, so the NIF is our national tax number. It's the holy grail, and it's the first step that you need to take if you're looking to buy in Portugal. So what you do is you get a Portuguese tax number. It's a non-resident tax number to begin with, so it doesn't mean that you have to pay taxes in Portugal, only if you earn income in Portugal. But it is something that you require, first of all, to pay your property purchase tax when you buy a property. Also, if you want to open a bank account in Portugal, you need your Portuguese tax number. If you're buying with a partner or a spouse, then both of you need a tax number.
So you'd need two separate ones even if you were buying as a couple?
Correct. So each person has a separate tax number.
Okay, and one of the questions that we get a lot, because obviously we're dealing with an international crowd, people are traveling, they're all over the world. Do they physically need to be in Portugal for the conveyancing, or can this be done remotely? Can you sign contracts remotely, or do you physically need to be there at certain stages?
No, so you don't need to physically travel to Portugal. I mean, it's recommended to look at the property, but with today's technology, not even that's necessary. So what you can do is sign a power of attorney in the country where you're resident, and that has to have some formal requirements. So you have to go to a notary and get it apostilled, or you can go to a Portuguese consulate. And then with that document, your lawyer can represent you throughout the process. And even in terms of payments, if you're not able to open a Portuguese bank account, you can transfer the funds to your solicitor's client account, and then they can proceed with the payments on your behalf.
Okay, wow. I know we used COVID as a marker in life earlier, but again, that culturally changed the way that people buy and sell property. And Bruce, you might have experienced this as well. We were selling multi-million-pound properties on a video call because people weren't allowed to travel to view, and they still needed to buy, and they had a certain window. And it was frightening to think that people would spend comfortably £2-3 million buying a property that they've physically never been in or seen before. But in this day and age, obviously, a video call is as good as being there itself. So, Bruce, have you experienced that?
During COVID, I mean, during 2020, we were shut down for most of the year. So we actually didn't have a bad year. It wasn't a good year, but we certainly were into double-digit numbers of virtual sales that were so. One that I remember very well was they were in Indonesia, completely grounded, couldn't even leave their houses. In Indonesia, and they went ahead, they viewed the property, and we got a surveyor in as well. We managed to get everything done, and they got complete peace of mind, and we're very happy. And so that's just one of many cases.
Wow. And look, going back and talking about digital viewings, obviously, and buying things that you've not seen, Vicky, how many people buy off plan? You know, they're buying maybe a new build that isn't physically constructed, so they can't go in, they can't inspect the property. But I would imagine there's a lot of new development. You know, what are the sort of percentage of off-plan sales that you deal with yourself? And, you know, what are the pitfalls? What are the things to consider for anyone thinking of taking that route?
Well, buying off-plan is something that is quite common in Portugal, and it is attractive in the sense that you normally get a good deal if you come in early. There is a danger because there's a very long period of time between exchange and completion. So you are paying money for something that doesn't legally exist yet. And so the contracts have to be very carefully worded. And if possible, try get some guarantee for the amounts that you are paying as a deposit, as a reinforcement of deposit. And we always urge clients to put in a long stop clause. So the final date after which, if the property isn't built or licensed, that you can get back at least what you've put in in terms of payments. So it is something that requires a carefully worded contract, but it might be a good deal, as I said, getting in early. And there's also not a lot of offer of new builds. So as soon as something comes up, we tend to grab it as soon as they can.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of, and again, I'm not sure if this would be one for you or not, Vicky, but one of the questions asked is, if somebody's buying a property as a holiday home that they're also then hoping to let or rent the property, are there any covenants that they need to be aware of in terms of rental, any restrictions? What are the things that people specifically need to look for?
No, that's an important question, Jonathan. What happens is in Portugal, if you want to do short-term rentals, you need a license. And the government has been trying to restrict the number of licenses that are granted, because there's certain areas that have been over-licensed. And so in order to try diminish the number of AL licenses, which is what we call it, the town councils can now define what percentage of habitation in that area can be allocated to short-term rentals. So if you're buying in a certain area, the first thing you should check is whether or not they're still issuing these licenses. And if, for example, you're buying in a building, so it's an apartment, you need to confirm that the condominium doesn't restrict the concession of those licenses, because the condominium in its constitution can state that they do not allow short-term lettings in that building. So there's a whole lot of due diligence that needs to be done prior to the promissory contract to ensure that, yes, you will be able to get a short-term letting license.
Okay, that's fascinating. So, and again, this is maybe one for Bruce to answer. Would it be fair to say, if you've got 6 properties in one block and 3 have been granted a license for short-term rentals and the other 3 haven't, would the ones that have been granted the license, hypothetically speaking, would they be worth more money because they're open to a wider audience of buyers, or does that really have no bearing?
I would say it doesn't have any bearing, because if the license, correct me if I'm wrong, Vicky, but the license is not issued to it's for the property, but when the property sells, the license doesn't carry through to the new owner.
No.
So it would be easier to reapply once the property's already had an AL license, because there are certain criteria that have to be met. So fire extinguishers in the house, there has to be an inspection. If the inspection's already been carried out, then it's going to be easier to submit for a new license or following, but certainly wouldn't affect the price. No way.
But just because it's got a license now, you can't automatically assume as a buyer that it's going to be carried over and that you're automatically going to get it. So can you apply for that prior to committing to the property, or is that something that you need to roll the dice and find out afterwards?
You can confirm before you sign the contract whether or not it's possible to apply, but you can only apply once you own the property.
Oh, okay. Have there been any instances where somebody's looked into it and then purchased and then found out that actually they haven't been granted because the local area is oversubscribed with licenses?
No, thankfully, only if there's a change in legislation in the meantime. But if you keep the period between exchange and completion short, in principle, what you've been advised will be maintained prior to completion.
Okay, wow, fascinating. Vicky, I've got so many questions that I'd like to ask us. I've got so many to run through from people spectating, but we're going to run out of time to get round and talk to everybody, I'm afraid. And we haven't got to the King of Currency yet. So I'm going to jump across to Steve, who's going to give a bit of an introduction to his business and also his level of expertise. And you can also tell us the difference between using a currency specialist versus just using your bank.
Yes, hello, hi everybody. My name's Steve, and yeah, I'm a currency expert, I suppose. In essence, we're a very property savvy currency broker, or indeed really a Portugal property currency specialist. We've been in Portugal, got a couple of offices in Portugal, and have been there for coming up to 10 years, but we're 25 years old now. Basically, what we do here is we offer a better exchange rate and a better service than that of the bank. So that means if you're looking at buying property and are doing that internationally and therefore have the exposure to the moving currency market, our service is here to help, and you'll be an everyday client for us that will try and make you feel as special as we can. But in essence, it's making your money go further, or indeed making the purchase cheaper for you. And that's not just transactionally, which is how it all started some 20 odd years ago. Ultimately, if we couldn't save people money, we wouldn't have over 200 people on the payroll. But it's also around risk mitigation because the currency market's moving so much. So information and education around what's driving the market, and therefore the price that you'll pay. So the highlight here is a very, if you're looking at the dream of a Portugal property, as many people are, and you're international, there's a huge difference between cost and price. So what you're looking at and what it might cost you by the time the bill will start coming round. And that's where we help.
Okay. And would you say that your job has got more interesting in recent years in terms of volatility around markets?
Yes, yes. For reasons everyone will be smirking and smiling about, there is something big happened, and all of a sudden it's got a bit busier. And by that I mean the volatility in the market. So all joking aside, when I walked into the business some nearly 20 years ago, if the currency market moved by 0.5%, it would be on the front of the FT the next day. It would be a big deal. Now, if we see that 3 days in a week, it is a quiet week. You know, the currency market is moving hugely and can have a dramatic impact on the price of a property, or indeed how many bedrooms that property has. It makes a big impact now, yes. It's no longer transactional. It's why I'm proudly here with the rest of the experts you've heard from today. Don't leave currency to the end of the to-do list, otherwise it can sting and be uncomfortable.
Yeah, so obviously you've got different key milestones throughout the process. What are your recommendations in terms of when somebody should include this in with their strategy? You know, is it when they're out viewing? Is it when they find a property and they're just about to offer? Is it before they've even started thinking about the location? You know, what is the ideal timeline to position you in?
Well, same as everyone else. It's the same as everyone, right? You start having these conversations early to make sure you're not stung. You know, Google doesn't count as advice anymore. You need to speak to the specialists and the experts. That's why we are all here respectively in doing this so very much. The people in the audience and the clients we're all engaging in, helping and adding meaningful value into all day, every day. To the binary point of your question there, Jonathan, it's, you know, if you are looking at Portugal property and you're saying, yes, I will have a property in Portugal for Christmas, your trading window is open. You should be starting to consider and be aware of what those prices are going to be. If you're saying, I need to go on a viewing trip, spend some time with Bruce and his wonderful team to help find that dream property first, then we're a little bit later on the to-do list. But you know, I dealt with a couple of Americans buying in Portugal very recently, and I was kindly introduced to them at the start of their process, i.e., I like this property, can I come and see it next month? And both of them bought their currency before they'd got on a plane. They were so aware that they knew that they were going to be buying a property, just which property. And the narrative from President Trump is a weakening of the dollar. It means that there's a relatively strong argument. There's a lot of risk there for any US nominated budget holders in the audience or watching this back. Is there more risk than opportunity? And that's the kind of conversations and information and education here, and the dedicated 200 people, wonderful people behind me, help our clients with.
How much does this cost?
Good question, because normally the questions are, what's the security, what's the process, what's the cost? How we make our money is a very small difference between where we buy and where we sell our currency. So it's built into the exchange rate that we offer. So there's no additional fee or invoice from us to speak to us, engage with us, talk to our highly experienced trading team, hold funds, send funds. It's all at that execution point. But to give some scale, today we've already done over 25 million in flow. We do billions a year. So huge volumes, teeny weeny margins, just from a transactional perspective, but I don't want to shy away from the currency volatility and therefore the risk. Now, if you're considering doing this, when was the last time the bank rang you? When was the last time you spoke to the bank? And here's the rate, which is better than the bank. Here's the theme. Here's the trends we're seeing. These are the days and events that could be positive, that could be negative. How do you want to manage that exposure? Oh, look, Trump's done something else. We're proactively ringing you and making you aware of it and using dedicated specialist tools to help you manage that exposure. If the market's moving and your budget's at a certain level, you can put safety nets in below the market and above the market to make sure that X still equals X and you can still afford that dream property in the summer.
Okay. And look, you just talked about risk and security. When I'm dealing with a bank, I generally feel quite reassured that my money is safe with them. Is my money safe with you guys?
Yes. Won't even joke about it. Yeah, incredibly secure. We're private equity owned. We're regulated and authorized across the UK, Europe, and in the US. So technically, we're 3 businesses, which means 3 lots of boards, 3 regulators, three teams of compliance. So we've got more people in compliance than we have in marketing. Yeah, very, very secure, very regulated plus, yes.
Okay. And look, in terms of crystal ball time, trying to predict the future,
Okay, here it is.
I appreciate you haven't got one. Looking at the landscape for 2026, is there anything on the horizon that you wouldn't be surprised to see? You know, what are your expectations?
Okay. Trump's been pretty clear around weakening the dollar. If he's successful at weakening the dollar, that means if you are a US budget holder at the moment, some people will argue there's more risk than opportunity. So have that consideration. But what I'm also going to highlight is that the currency market, the biggest currency pairing is the dollar euro. So as the dollar weakens, investors put their money in the euro. So it might well, even though the dollar's going down, that could strengthen the euro, in theory, making that more expensive to buy. So equally, if you're watching this back or listening live and you're from the UK, we're talking about a couple of interest rates coming into the UK. There's an 80% chance in less than 30 days that we're going to see another interest rate cut. That generally weakens the currency in question, making it cheaper to buy, but more expensive to sell. So yeah, at the moment, it's changing a lot. But you know, if you don't know, you don't know, and you should be talking to someone about this. Yes, that's the narrative you'll get from all of us here. You know, ChatGPT doesn't count as advice. You know, you need to speak to the specialists and experts about it, and this is why we're all here and have been doing it for decades.
So staying with the UK for a second, because probably a third of the people that are dialed in to watch this are looking to relocate from the UK. The landscape there, obviously you've just referenced the Bank of England. I think the last vote from the Monetary Policy Committee was 5 against dropping the interest rate, and 4 for, which was higher than what was expected. We were probably expecting a 2 to 7 split. Predictions for the UK?
Yeah, for those that don't know, the interest rate is a key parameter and driver of value, and ultimately it's going to make a real impact on how expensive a property is. The last Monetary Policy Committee, of which there's 9 members that vote for interest rate change, you're right, there was 5 that said stick and 4 that said change. The expectation was that it was only going to be 2 that wanted a cut. So it's increased the probability. So it's an 85% chance that we'll get 1 cut next month, and there's about a 70% chance we'll get 1 within a further 60 days. We're looking at 2 interest rate cuts. So at the moment, again, that question to ask is, a lot of clients that we deal with, I'm going to be honest with everyone here, you've all been aspiring to buy that property in the sun for a long time, working very hard for it, getting taxed on the money you're earning to save up for this. How much risk do you want to open yourself up to? And it's about managing that risk and proactively looking at it to make sure that X still equals X later and the property remains affordable. So again, have that conversation early.
Okay, wonderful. Steve, some great tips there. I'm super conscious of time, and we've only got 5 minutes left, and I've got some questions coming in live. I've still got some others to answer. And like I said, forgive me if we don't get the chance to cover everything. We can go back through retrospectively with some one-on-one meetings. And this is to anybody that wants to answer it. Is it easy to get a mortgage in Portugal? And then what about if you were to remortgage? Anyone can take the lead on this. It might be Mark that might be the most significant person to take this.
Yeah, I mean, I can offer my view. I personally have a mortgage now. There are mortgage brokers over here, which I or Bruce could probably introduce you to, and they're specialists. They have relationships with all the banks. Yes, in short, it's very possible. When I was getting the mortgage, you had to have 3 years of Portuguese tax returns in order to validate it. Now, I think they've loosened up on that, because I've dealt with a client recently who's only just arrived in Portugal and has got a mortgage. So yeah, I think if you speak to the right people, it will be possible.
Okay, fair enough. Another one that's come through. What are the rental yields? What is the sort of standard percentage that you would aim for? And I appreciate the more expensive the property, the more that rental yield is going to drop. But Bruce, that's maybe one for you.
It's really how long's a piece of string. It really is a difficult one, but I think an ideal rental yield for any owner investor, if they're not living in a property, but realistic, it would be to look at 5%, and if it's possible to net that. I mean, we have some people who, for example, who live here in the Algarve. They have a rental property that they rent out. They handle everything themselves. As long as they're fairly good with the marketing, they can realistically get 5% or more, especially in an area with good holiday let potential. So, for example, where I'm in Carbuero Villas, say within walking distance of the town, very, very high demand for rentals, and they will rent out pretty much year round. A lot of people, a lot of owners would basically buy a property, come down and use it for a couple of weeks themselves in the summer. They may use it for a couple of months during the winter or something. So they would expect to earn less. But we have a lot of owners. I mean, we offer a full property management and rental service here, and it's an important part of the business. And a lot of our clients really are people who are just looking to cover all of their costs. So their investment is obviously increasing value. All of their maintenance costs are covered from their rentals. They can even probably realistically cover some flights and expenses, but basically they have no costs involved in owning their house. If they want to make a profit out of it and make 3%, 4%, 5%, somewhere within there, it all depends on how much you use the property, realistically.
Okay, and staying with rental for a second, what sort of percentage of people will move to the Algarve and rent first to understand the lie of the land before then committing to a purchase? So they'll almost get a feel for the area to know the right places to buy, or do most people just jump straight into a purchase?
I think it depends where they're coming from. Brits, Europeans, typically would make multiple visits, maybe some longer term stays of a month or two during the winter month, but they wouldn't long term let before buying. For people from the US, it's obviously it's a far longer distance to travel, and typically the US residential buyer, so who's coming in on their D7 visa, they would typically rent for a year, yes. And we can find long-term lets, but it's not easy. It's far easier to find the property just to rent for 6 months of the winter. So, for example, a property that's on the holiday let market, that can be rented very, very cheaply for the winter months, say from November to March or something. Whereas if you wanted to find the same property to rent all year round, the monthly rent is going to be 3 to 4 times higher than it would be just for a winter let, because you're covering the summer months as well. when obviously the weekly rents would be more than a couple of months in the winter.
Yeah, understood. So timing and time of the year is going to have an impact as well. I'm super conscious of time. I'm going to finish with one last question, if that's okay. And you're going to have to forgive my ignorance at trying to pronounce this, because it's one that's just come through from one of the live listeners. Websites say that the law, Decreto Ley 76/2024 in November 2024 changed the AL rules such that the rental license for a property transfers to the new owner. This contradicts the panel's comments, which seem to imply the previous law. So it was one of the things that we talked about earlier. So does it transfer over, or is that not right? Or, I mean, it could be a ChatGPT based question, which could be wildly inaccurate. Can anybody jump in for me?
No, as Bruce mentioned, the license attaches to the person, not the building. It is possible in some councils to request the transfer of the license from the old owner to the new owner without having to request a new license. But it always attaches to the person, never the property.
Okay, understood. Vicky, thank you very much for that. I'm going to part with, I'm going to encourage everybody that's got further questions to get in contact with us. We're more than happy to help. We can talk to you individually. We can give you the guidance that you need. And I'm sure that there's going to be many more questions, but we've run over by a minute. I'm very grateful for everybody's time on the panel. Thank you very much for all of your expertise, and thank you to everybody else that's taken the time to dial in and listen. Yeah, it's been enlightening, and hopefully one day I'll be in a position where I'll come and buy in the Algarve myself. Not quite there yet, and I've got a bit more work to do here in the UK. But thank you very much for dialing in. Have a wonderful evening. See you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.